Hello and welcome to the Frans van Kat interview. I'm Annette Young. As the West struggles to wrap its head around the repercussions of the Arab Spring, one issue that stands out increasingly is the role of Islamists in all aspects of life. So is it not so much an Arab revolution as it is a Muslim revolution? Amel Boubacar is a sociologist who's just co-authored a book entitled Whatever Happened to the Islamists, Salafists, Heavy Metal and the Lure of Consumerist Islam. She joins me here in the studio today. Amel, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.
Amel, referring to your book title, is there such a thing as a heavy metal Islamist?
Well, at least heavy metal Muslims have always been there. And the new thing now and the interesting thing is that now playing music, organizing Islamic pop concerts is also a way to promote Islam politically. So that's why the book is about new ways to promote political Islam.
How do they do that, though, within the confines of an orthodox religion, which doesn't look that approvingly towards certain forms of music?
Well, it has to be linked with the transformation of Islamist parties themselves, you know. This was a very fixed ideology with an obsession for overtaking the state and erecting an Islamic state, converting everyone to their rules and their own ideology. But eventually they finally found out that nowadays, it was not the best way to touch people and to convert people to their ideology. So now you have new actors who may be inheritors of these traditional codes of Islamism, but doing new things, promoting Islam in a new way, political Islam, very important, and that's what we are trying to explain in the book.
So, Amel, who are those new actors?
First, those new actors have been re-Islamized. Re-Islamization is a very important process that we should mention. They have been re-Islamized in Europe, in the Arab world, mainly by traditional Islamist parties. They have been the ones who have explained to them that Islam is something very important in their daily lives and it's something that can empower them. That's the crucial point. They then went to these parties. For some of them, these young Muslims involved and engaged Muslims I'm talking about, they went to Islamist parties, they attended conferences, they had sometimes dispute over what political Islam should mean, and finally a lot of them choose to disengage from these traditional structures.
So what are the tools apart from heavy metal music are they using?
Oh, the heavy metal thing was just to mention, it's the title of the paper of one author in the book, and it was just to mention that now you have different way to promote political Islam. It's not solely to be promoted in the frame of a political party as such, or through very traditional discourses.
In other words, it's beyond the mosque.
It's beyond the party, actually, because that's very interesting to see that these Islamists have been purely political actors. We should understand that actually political Islam is a process. That's not a project. And political Islam is adapting itself, and Islamists then adapting themselves to their daily environment, to the priorities of their political environment. And these priorities are not the same anymore. They have been, for example, about, as I said, trying to be in power, trying to win the elections, trying to impose the fact that Islam should be the central element of every Muslim's political ideology. But now these priorities have changed, especially with these new Islamist parties now in power, for example, in Egypt and Tunisia and Morocco.
Now, there are multiple faces of Islam, aren't they, at the moment? I mean, it can be anything from the jihadist fighter in Mali through to the Muslim Brotherhood politician in Egypt. But what joins these rather disparate groups?
I would say that we in the West are labeling as Islamist very, very various number of different actors. But if we talk about Islamist parties, what really joins between themselves is the way they have been professionalized, co-opted throughout the 90s, and how now they have to reinvent a new way to promote political Islam in a non-oppositional way, because especially after the Arab Spring and the elections of these Islamist parties and the fact that they are now in power, we are seeing how their challenge, that main challenge, is really to invent again a non-oppositional way.
To be in the political establishment as opposed to being in the opposition. That's what you're saying.
Yeah, and especially to invent, because their promises were about, we are going to make social justice something too. We are going to deal with economic redistribution in the name of Islam. So we are going to use Islam politically in a way that is going to favor the masses. And
but the one striking factor for somebody in the West, when you look at political Islam, and particularly the rise of those Islamist parties, is the role of women.
Yeah.
And for example, in Egypt, where in recent days one of our own female correspondents was attacked by a crowd, I mean, and everybody was looking towards President Mohamed Morsi and how he would react to that. That's a sticking point for them, isn't it?
Yeah, but that's also related to what I was mentioning earlier. They are political actors, and they are choosing their priorities according to their political agenda, not to their own face, Islamic face. And if you mention the role of women, for example, among Islamist ranks, you will see that there are a lot of women that are very powerful. Of course, the role of these women is always, always comes to, always serves the bigger ideology of political Islam and the bigger role of the party on the political scene. It's not about promoting women for themselves. But at the same time, they are, and it's funny in some way, they are the ones who have actually put a lot of women in the streets demonstrating. And
well, certainly that was the image of what we saw from the Arab Spring, was women with hijab taking to the streets.
That's something else actually, because it's true that you had a lot of women among the ranks of Islamist parties, but you also have a lot of young women who have chosen, for example, to wear the hijab, the Islamic veil, and who do not recognize themselves as belonging to solely Islamist parties, but who recognize that their face can be a political tool. And that's really what the book is about. It's how political Islam is reaching new publics and how these new actors are using political Islam in new ways, in new public spheres.
And as you've been very correct to point out, we in the West are very quick to label and to group people, but certainly Western leaders have struggled with this emergence of Islamist leaders, haven't they?
Oh yeah, I mean, actually, Western leaders are obsessed with stability. I mean, that's what is the most important to them. But they should maybe try to understand what are the core transformations of political Islam within Islamist parties. As I said, they are, for example, their relationship with the West has evolved enormously. They were prompt to explain to the West that they were not anti-Western or they are not against Western values. For example, remember when Nahda won the elections, the first question in France, for example, was, are we going to be able to go to the beach, again? But that's not really the priority of Islamist party. Of course, they can explain to the West that they have nothing to worry about, but really their priorities are certainly not about, or solely not anymore about what the West is going to think about them.
Do you think they'll be able to rise to the challenge, Amel, because they have a lot on their plate? As you say, they're dealing with the realities of governing a country, and many of these countries, like every country in the world, is facing a global economic crisis. So, are they up to the job?
When you go to Tunis, for example, and you discuss with people who have voted Nahda, they told you that they have done so just in order to make the promises of Islam as a political tool real for their own purposes and their own needs. For example, in order, as I say, to struggle against corruption, to get jobs, and not only because, or not totally because, they were convinced of political Islam as a political ideology as it is presented by the Islamist parties. So you may of course see also that the people who have voted Nahda, for example, even now are still faithful to Nahda and still hoping for some improvement in their daily lives, but they are not thinking about Nahda as, you know, the numerical actors of the democratization of Tunisia. I mean, they are quite pragmatic and they put them in power, but they still have strong demands and they can take the streets and they can be critical about Nahda for not, you know, achieving their promises.
But it wasn't really the Islamist leaders who began this revolution. It was very much a revolution of young secular people who don't seem to have the same degree of voice by comparison these days to their Islamist peers.
I don't think that actually revolutions were held by young secular people. Of course, secular elements, especially from the left, were among the ranks of revolutionaries, but Islam as a political tool, and not Islam as a political tool as used by Islamist parties, was very important. I mean, when you see these images of people shouting Allahu Akbar, it doesn't mean we are Islamists and we are, you know, going to vote for Islamist parties later, but it is about, again, as Islam has a way to empower oneself, and Islam has a way also to bring something new on the political scene, because don't forget that these people were evolving in post-totalitarian context, so there are new opportunities for Islam to be represented in a new way on the political scene.
Do you think the West realises that?
No, not at all. I think the West is very pragmatic also, and for example, when you look at the US or even now at the European Union, it doesn't matter to them if they are Islamist or not, it just matters how they may represent the voice of the man of the street. And the thing is that we should not sacralize these actors. They are not religious actors, they are political actors whose beliefs may change, and they are also representing themselves. I mean, they are to some extent political elite. They are not, you know, representing 100% the thought of the man of the street.
Amel Boubacar, I'm afraid that's all we have time for. Thank you so much for being with us. And that's it for this edition of the France 24 interview. Do stay with us here on France 24.